Something was buried in the Australian outback that should not exist. Stone tools, pulled from a rock shelter called Majid Bebe in 2017, dated to roughly 65,000 years old. That number broke a timeline archaeologists had trusted for decades. Because to leave those tools there, someone first had to cross open ocean. Not a river, not a shallow strait. Even at the Ice Age's lowest sea levels, reaching that land meant at least 90 kilometers of deep water. No coastline visible on either side. No guarantee anything waited on the other end. No compass existed. No maps existed. No written record of currents or wind. And they made the crossing anyway, not once, but enough times to found a population that lasted tens of thousands of years. The real mystery was never whether they arrived. It's how anyone found the nerve to leave. Here's the strange part. They weren't the only ones. On the opposite side of the planet, a different group of humans was making an equally blind leap across a place most people have never heard of. During the Ice Age, dropped sea levels exposed a wide stretch of land connecting Siberia to Alaska, a region scientists call Beringia. Genetic evidence suggests small groups lived there for possibly thousands of years, cut off from both continents before ever moving south into the Americas. No trail. No one who had gone before them. Two separate migrations, two oceans apart, both driven forward by people willing to walk or sail directly into the unknown. Both crossings trace back to the same route. Around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, small groups began leaving the African continent, moving along coastlines rather than cutting inland through unfamiliar terrain. They weren't wandering. They were reading the land the way a hunter reads a trail. Rivers meeting the sea. Fish traps forming naturally in tidal pools. Migratory birds arriving on schedule. Every one of those details was a clue in a puzzle whose only reward was staying alive. That habit of reading the world for hidden patterns is the seed everything else in this story grows from. But it's the ocean crossings that get stranger the closer you look. Thousands of years after Majid Bebe, and thousands of kilometers away, another group faced an even harder version of the same problem. The ancestors of the Polynesians pushed out into the largest ocean on Earth in double-hulled canoes, and they weren't traveling light. These were entire communities. Children, elderly parents, breadfruit saplings and taro cuttings, packed for a life on land that might not exist at all. Archaeologists, tracing the Lapita culture, whose pottery turns up scattered from New Guinea to Samoa, have mapped this expansion across roughly 3,000 years, starting around 1500 BCE. But the pottery isn't the strangest evidence. The navigation is. No instruments, no charts, no metal tools for measuring direction of any kind. Instead, Polynesian wayfinders built an entire system from memory alone, using the exact rising and setting points of specific stars as a living compass, refined and passed down across generations. For a long time, historians assumed this was rough intuition dressed up as tradition, closer to guesswork than science. They were wrong. In the 1970s, a canoe called Hokulea was built to test whether the old techniques actually worked. A master navigator named Mau Piailug sailed it from Hawaii to Tahiti using no modern instruments whatsoever. He made it. And in doing so, he proved that what looked like folklore was, in fact, a precise and testable science. Then it got stranger still. Piailug and navigators like him didn't only read stars. They read the ocean itself as a physical text. Swells generated by storms thousands of kilometers away bend and interact as they pass around islands, forming patterns that never repeat by accident. A skilled navigator could lie flat inside the canoe's hull and feel that rhythm through his own body, sensing shifts that revealed land long before it was visible. Some reportedly detected an island from over 30 kilometers out, using nothing but the feel of the water beneath the hull. That alone should stop you. But there's one more layer, and it's the strangest of all. On some islands, oral tradition describes navigators locating land through the flight patterns of specific seabirds, species that fly out to fish each morning and return to roost each evening, tracing an invisible line straight back to shore. Stack that on top of swell reading, star paths, cloud formations that gather differently above land than open water, even shifts in the sea's color near a reef. And you're not looking at one skill anymore. You're looking at an entire integrated science, cross-checked in real time, with human lives as the only margin for error. Zoom out, and the scale of what this produced is almost hard to process. By the time this expansion finished, Polynesian voyagers had settled a triangle of ocean stretching from Hawaii in the north to New Zealand in the southwest, to Rapa Nui, Easter Island, thousands of kilometers to the east, one of the most isolated pieces of land on the planet. That triangle covers an area larger than the continent of Asia, nearly all of it open ocean, and every single point inside it was found, settled, and connected using nothing but stars, swells, birds, and memory. No other culture in human history mapped that much of the planet with tools this simple. Now sit with what that actually required emotionally. Every one of these voyages was a one-way gamble taken by families, not soldiers. Skeletal remains and settlement patterns across the Pacific confirm it. These weren't expeditions of young men chasing glory. They were grandparents, parents, and infants, launched with no certainty of return, and no guarantee the destination even existed. Trusting your children's lives to a canoe, a handful of stars, and the felt memory of a wave. Picture the sound inside that hull at night. Water against wood, a sleeping child, a navigator lying silent and still, reading the ocean through his own spine because there was nothing else to read it with. That isn't blind hope. That's faith built entirely out of observation. And the price of that faith is written in absence. Genetic comparisons between modern Pacific Islanders and ancient remains support a staged expansion. Population settling, adapting, then launching new voyages generations later, each one carrying refined knowledge forward. But for every successful landing, researchers believe others were lost completely. Their crews never seen again, their fate unrecorded. Every island we know about represents the ones who survived. The story of everyone else exists only as silence. Here's the twist that upends how most people picture this. We tend to imagine ancient wayfinding as a cruder, simpler version of modern navigation. Something we've since improved on. It's the opposite. A GPS satellite does the thinking for you. Piailug had to hold an entire moving map. Stars, currents, wind, wave rhythm, bird migration, inside his memory, updating it hour by hour, with nothing written down and nothing to fall back on except whether people lived or died at sea. The same instinct shows up elsewhere too. Some researchers believe Norse sailors used a type of calcite crystal, a sunstone, to locate the sun's position through overcast Arctic skies when direct sunlight was invisible. The evidence for this remains debated. But the pattern holds everywhere you look. Humans denied tools built extraordinarily precise systems out of pure observation instead. Arctic peoples navigated sea ice by reading its color and texture for hidden thin patches. Desert travelers tracked barely visible star drift to hold a straight line across dunes that looked identical for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. Different landscapes, different senses, same underlying discipline. Watch closely enough, for long enough, and the world quietly tells you where you are. And that pattern hasn't disappeared. It's just been buried under a screen. Most of us today follow a blue dot without a single thought about wind, current, or direction. If our phones failed tomorrow, plenty of people would struggle to navigate an unfamiliar neighborhood, let alone an ocean. And yet search and rescue teams still study traditional wayfinding to read water currents. The Polynesian Voyaging Society, founded around the original Hokulea project, has since sailed that same canoe on a multi-year voyage circling the entire globe, using traditional navigation for long open ocean stretches, training a new generation of wayfinders in techniques that were nearly extinct within living memory. What almost disappeared forever is now being taught again, on purpose, before the last people who remember it are gone. Which brings this back to that quiet rock shelter in northern Australia. Those stone tools sitting in a 65,000-year-old lair aren't just artifacts. They're the physical residue of a decision made by real people with everything to lose, to trust an invisible pattern in the world enough to risk it all on a crossing with no promise of land on the other side. Every wave read centuries later by a Polynesian navigator, every star memorized and handed down, traces back to that same original refusal to let an empty horizon be the end of the story. Ancient humans crossed the world without maps because they built something maps could never replace: the discipline to notice what everyone else overlooked and the nerve to bet their families' lives on it. That's what's actually buried at Majid Bebe. Not proof that people arrived, proof that long before satellites, before GPS, before a single line was ever drawn on paper, humans had already learned how to find their way home, wherever home turned out to be.